Buenos días a todas y todos. Bueno, quisiera antes de presentar a la primera ponente decir que bueno, es un honor para mí, un placer enorme poder moderar estas primeras mesas y bueno, le agradezco muchísimo a Isabel por haberme propuesto este cometido y al museo de manera general y también felicitar por este evento y también por las actividades conmemorativas en el cual se inscriben. Muchísimas gracias y felicidades. Rosemarie Mousseaux habló en español porque veo que nadie se pone el aparato, con lo cual pienso que es mejor decirlo en español. Rosemarie Mousseaux, la primera ponente, es conservadora general del patrimonio, especialista en arqueología clásica. Fue sucesivamente directora científica de las colecciones prehistóricas, protohistóricas y antiguas de las reservas arqueológicas de la ciudad de París y de la cripta arqueológica del Parvis Notre-Dame. Después, directora del Cognac-G, tras haber participado en la prefiguración del establecimiento público Paris Musée. Entre 2018 y 2021 fue nombrada conservadora jefe de la Edad Moderna en el Louvre, Abu Dhabi, y desde 2021 Rosemarie Mousseaux es directora del Museo Arqueológico Nacional, el MAN de Francia, y del Domaine National de Saint-Germain-en-Laye.
Thanks a lot, Nancy. I just first to start, really thank warmly your director, Isabel. Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot, Mercedes, too, for this organization, which has a long-awaited organization. Just to have a meeting and an encounters like this with European colleagues, sharing ideas, sharing insights, sharing as a picture where we are today is really insightful for us. We are in a bridge currently at MAN. We are sharing the same name. We are in a bridge because we are about to start a long walk about a complete refurbishment and a restructuration of a building. So for me too, I have some answers to ask to my colleagues, and maybe I will have some answers, some different answers tonight. Just to start, here is our main, because it was a question of picture today, our main challenge today is really how to turn an old-fashioned building, an old-fashioned museum, into a 21st century museum. How can we welcome, how can we enhance the visitors' experience to this museum too? And of course, visiting such a museum here in Madrid is insightful for us. I can see too that we are really sharing one crucial mission for us, and your Ministry of Culture has told us today. This crucial mission is about how we can engage, how we can develop cultural engagement to the youngest generation. This is our core mission, and this is a core mission that we are sharing in between us. So that's why I just wanted to share with you some points directly related to the man today. This is a beautiful picture. This is a former royal palace that you can see behind with a fantastic park. This palace actually has completely been rebuilt during the 19th century to host a National Archaeological Museum. It's a volunteer related directly to the Emperor Napoleon III, and this is why we have today a single National Museum of Archaeology in France. It was also a moment of complete refurbishment for the park, and what you can see today, of course, is a completely rebuilt park. This park was a former royal domain too. It was a royal domain preserved for hunting, and what you can see today is a completely modern park. This Grand Bassin, it's its name, this Grand Bassin has been inaugurated only 1 year ago. It's completely reconstruction from engravings dating back to the 17th century. And this is our main challenge too. We are in front, finally, of a park which is a modern park and with an underground completely unknown. And today too, we have this scope with archaeology to discover what is behind what we can see. What can we reveal to the audience who is daily using this park? So behind this fantastic postcard, what are we confronting today? As I told you, this was a former royal palace. A former royal palace used from the 11th century up to the 17th century. Louis XIV decided to spread and to quit definitively Saint-Germain-en-Laye in 1682 to finally establish the court at Versailles in the same year. But before him, we had already 7 phases of reconstruction, and they are practically unknown today. That's why we needed to launch an archaeological program, and this is something that we are starting now, to completely refresh our ideas and, let's say, struggle against a kind of mythology directly related to this royal palace. So what you can see today, when you are looking at this postcard, it's a reconstruction made from engravings dating back to the Renaissance times. We know that, because we had a kind of selection, we know that the building was completely at, let's say, 85% rebuilt in the mid-19th century up to the beginning of the 20th century. This is a big advantage today for us, because it's a modern building, and that means, too, that we have a great gallery built up to finally host the question of a museum. The museum has been decided, as I told you, in 1862 and opened its first gallery in 1867. The first galleries were only 7 to be inaugurated, and we had to wait about 45 years to finalize the reconstructions of the museum. So that means that finally the museum was completely ended in 1907. It was a museum completely redesigned by the same architect. So that the showcases that you can see, the showcases which are behind me, are exactly the showcases that we have kept today in the upper floors. It's not that? I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, the showcases, as I was saying, that you can see just behind me. So it's an engraving dating back of the inauguration. You discover these fantastic showcases, wooden made, with an accumulation of objects. It was a scientific museum, and it was a scientific display made definitively to put together all the items that were collected into the national borders, but also internationally. And this is one of the specificities of National Archaeological Museum. We have a global collection too. At the same time, it was really conceived to be a laboratory for the methodology in archaeology. That means that we are keeping to documentation about this process of what is archaeology and how it is evolving. At the same time, too, we had cast workshops and we had photography workshops. That means that today we have really ancient casts, sometimes having a value of an original one, meaning, too, that we have a collection of photographs, which are really important. And third components of that, we had an artistic display, too. Because one of the main elements which were really important for the founders of this museum was how can we transmit that to the audience? How can they understand how finally this past society was looking like? That means that we have to, for instance, artists like Frémiet or Cormion, who are really important today, and we were finally in front of an artistic display too. All these elements have completely vanished at the end of the first era of the museum. Quite quickly, actually, a lot of the objects were arriving, and we had a massive arrival of objects before World War I. When I say today that 80% of the 3 million of the collection arrived before World War I, you can imagine what could be working in a museum like this before. It was just a permanent arrival of archaeological artifacts. That means, too, that as we didn't have storage initially, we needed to have and to spare spaces for this storage. And the first closure of the 44 galleries inaugurated in 1907 were initiated finally during before World War II. A big project launched after the Second World War, after World War II, was launched by Malraux, who decided to reduce the walk through the galleries, to reduce the visitor's experience, and finally, before having 44 galleries, finally, at the end of this second era of a museum, in 1984, you had only 19 galleries. The other galleries were really dedicated to storage, studies, welcoming researchers. The space was still lacking. And as the space was lacking, progressively, another part of the galleries were closed. Today, we have only 7 galleries open. So the main challenge that we are facing is really to reopen the museum. And we have started a new era, which has started, let's say, 6-7 years ago, to completely refresh all these elements, but also to move the collection. It's really an important movement. We have already moved maybe about 1.8 million of objects outside of the museum. A 6-year chain of treatment, which was quite massive. For us, it was really important also to have a better knowledge of a collection, to make a documentation process, to make a conservation process. And this is coming with another legal movement, which is really important. French law, as you may know, have introduced during the last 20 years a lot of legal framing aspects about working in a museum and working in archaeology. So with better knowledge of our collection, with these new processes too, we are able now to finally face the question of the acquisition process, to finally face too the question of the conservation process. This coming alongside with the last born of this legal system in July 2016, and now we are about to become also a national domain with the preservation of the identity and the creation of a brand related to that. So all these elements are really, let's say, the big challenge, because finally, who are we today? Who are we today? This is really a major difficulty to answer to. Because we're a few people, the team is just accounting about 80%, gardeners included. We have about 3 million objects to preserve. We have a park of 57 hectares to finally know, because we don't know it. And we have a fantastic building which has been completely transformed, but which is full of ghosts in its walls and full of mythology. So one of our main scope is to actually develop the research, feed and fuel all the scientific and cultural programs, and be able to retransmit it to the audience. Defining the identity was finally one of our main, just to tell me when I am not putting on that. I'm so sorry. So you can see just behind me the chain of treatment, which was installed in one of the former rooms. A kind of macro photography of what we are today, and of course, the question of the definition of our identity. As I told you, the idea was really to focus on our question of main missions. What are we? What can we do for the society? And at the same time, how can we assume what we are while we have really low means, human means? Financial means are one aspect, of course, but when you don't have the human means, you cannot really have financial assets. So we decided to finally work together and to imagine a new programming, which has been done and validated by our Ministry of Culture in 2023, to redevelop completely our scientific and cultural program, and at the same time to completely start the refurbishment of a museum. As you can see, is really what we have done. And I'm quite proud to say that the team has succeeded in doing a quite let's say, Odyssean work, Ulysses work, let's say so, by this movement with only a few people for the collection, by this launch of new researches program, by the fact that we have a new storage outside the museum, completely new to welcome all these elements, and of course that we are starting in July 2024 the upcoming works about that. It will take for us, we know that, 18 years to completely restructure the museum. It's really heavy work. Electricity, of course, which is a major element, but also to compete what we are doing. So if we know that we are working for 18 years, what can we do in between? And the idea was really finally to reassess what we were able to do so. What we have intended by looking back is really to finally focus on 3 key points, and these 3 key points now are really feeding, are really the food for any cultural programs, any scientific programs. Of course, the question of the stories of humankind is really important. We have a collection dedicated to do so. We have a collection built up for so. So the idea was really to mix up all these elements and at the same time to explain this approach. That's why the second key point about history of archaeology was so important too. The history of archaeology, its methods, its actors, we have kept them directly into our archives, into a storage, and we can express to the audience, oh, finally, you are doing archaeology. The third point is really important for us because one of our scope, as archaeology has evolved since the 19th century, of course, was to enlarge the chronological time. Our collection was built up from the prehistoric times up to only the medieval times. And the idea was to fill the gap in between the medieval times and today. The Domaine and the study, the archaeological study of the Domaine can help us in doing so. And like this, we have a complete restitution of a time lapse on a local landscape, on a local site, to finally propose to the audience a massive picture about archaeology. We have several items really important as well to do about research and development because we had a lot of experts, which is a good advantage, above all for digital experts. And this is something that we are aiming to do so too now, is really to develop our twin, our digital twin for the museum, while we were closed on a partly today. We decided to stay open, which is really a big challenge, and not to close. What you can see when you are looking at our archives, our data, and what you will be able to see on the future is, of course, this massive collection with a lot of items which are mythical items. I just will say a word about this young lady, which is the first portrait of humanity, dating back to Paleolithic times. But at the same time, as you can see, we have a collection which is really a global collection, counting pre-dynastic elements, counting as well human remains, counting as well elements from the Middle East. So all these items will help us to feed the question of these histories of humankind. At the same time, we have a documentation made directly and completely related to archaeology. Of course, notebooks, of course, archives, of course, models, and at the same time, the way archaeology was perceived by the audience. And engravings and newspapers are a good way to do so. I was speaking about the Cormont. It was made directly on site. So it's really created for this former museum of the 19th century. It's a 62-meter square painting. And we are today restoring it also. So the investments are quite wide, but at the same time, as you can see, the building also is to be told. The story of this building is really complex because it's a building which was not a single building into the area. You had another castle which has completely vanished, the new castle. You can see it in colored engravings too. But at the same time, when it was redesigned to become a palace of archaeology. And this is something that we are aiming to develop in the future. That's why when you are confronting the audience today, what they can see is really that. You have, at the same time, the question of how we can engage them, and we have some Instagram campaign which are quite useful for that. We have a question of a project of a construction. This one is just the stairs, which will be completely recreated from next July. And we are confronting the question of the, let's say, old-fashioned way of building things with a lot of crawling into the domain. And this is really the whole that we are trying to preserve. Another thing was to also keep in mind that we need to change the point of view about the museum, which has always been seen quite old-fashioned, quite desert, not really interesting because too scientific. And we have decided to turn the arguments finally in our favor and to propose, okay, if we are so old-fashioned, if we are so messy, just help us. So we have developed too a question of horizontal partnerships to enhance our networks and to produce new results and new resources for all the people. Everything is really fueling the different programs. The question of the challenges, the second challenges we were facing was about to prioritize the accessibilities. When I am speaking about accessibility, is really the physical accessibility to the collection, but to the building too, but also to the cognitive accessibility, which is really important when you want to feed the question of archaeology and the way archaeology is seen. It's not only object, and this is something that we need to develop too. The question of archaeology is about context, documentation, and the way finally people can identify them. A lot of our people are really what we call in France the primo visitor. It's their first visit. That means that they need to obtain key elements to understand the question of chronology of humankind, but at the same time, really the systems to face them. And at the same time, we have a lot of specialists. We don't have the in-between people. So it's one of our people to conquest today, too. What you can see is about all this collection. I don't know, yes. Just behind me, this is a gallery closed into the 30s. Where we have 12 galleries like this with huge and massive paintings identifying major sites across Europe. You have also these elements coming from Armenia, which were collected by the late 19th century. The former Paleolithic galleries, which is now completely dismantled, and it will be the first point of recreating the museum. And a map identifying where we are landing in Europe today. It was in 2023. Throughout the challenge, how can we respect and secure the stories and the heritage behind this wall? The question of this palace of archaeology was designed initially as a whole. That means that, for instance, just near the museum, you have these sites which were moved from the original space directly near the museum to explain that, okay, we are facing archaeology in the museum, but we have also sites. And this is something which is a new challenge too for us. This heritage was not really preserved or open to the audience. All these places were closed during the 30s, so about 1 century ago. And the idea is also to reopen that to the audience. At the same time, the major crisis problem is about what you can see behind, the fact that this building has not really been preserved through times. It has been used as an empty space to fill in. And we need absolutely to reconquer this space by putting outside all these elements which are the wire, electric wire, informatic wire, and digital wire. Fourth challenge, engage and educate. This is one of our main targeting. I was speaking about the core mission we are facing, and this is something that we have developed recently through signature programs, which are really a question of how we can finally enhance the comprehension, the accessibility of archaeology. So we have developed a few elements, which is the question, for instance, of active archaeology, putting directly at the core of the action the audience for them to be able to learn the process of archaeology. It's coming alongside with artistic residencies and scientific residencies, where the people in residencies are a part of a mediation program too, just to explain which is their daily life. Of course, we are still teaching and training a lot of students. We have also developed thematical aspects into the seasons, into the exhibitions, just to be clear about what archaeology can do for current society and today's society. And the other thing which is really important for us was to develop the recyclable resources. So to create the resources, we will see in a few minutes, and to be able finally to spread the word through the educational teams outside of the walls, which is really important. So all these resources are free of charge for the people who are using them. A part of our different thematics that we are using through the partners, so you have just behind me the question of archaeology in the city, which is a cycle that we are developing with university in several partners, and which is really a way finally to express what we can do today too, to make a link in between the today's society and the past societies. Of course, the question, which is really important, and I saw it was the case too, I know it was the case too on last 8 March, about archaeology, feminine archaeologists, that we are rediscovering today and the part they were taking into archaeological excavations. Just below, you can see some elements related to our engagement into hospitals, where we are developing mediation program directly with the kids for that. The kids are really one of our target group. Fifth challenge is about how we can promote our expertise by finally expressing to our values with the different partners. And so it was a part of a definition of our identity is what we can do today. Of course, the question of a scientific transparency is really important. The question of a social responsibility is also important. And as I was telling to you that the sharing of resources too. And this is a part also of our scope, related directly to social responsibility. That means that, for instance, when we are working with philanthropists, we are working to connect our core values with them. If they are not meeting, we will not work together. One aspect which is also important about sharing those expertise is the fact that we have a network in France called Musée, which gather more than 300 institutions related directly to archaeology. So we are animating this network. It's really important because like this we can finally have a professional exchanges directly on what we can do and what we cannot do today. And at the same time, it's a really important place outside of the conferences and talkings to maybe put together projects, something maybe we can do together today. About the question of research and developments, I wanted to show you one of our examples, for instance. This is a former massive stone slab, which was discovered in the beginning of the 20th century by a Briton. And this slab was not understood. Today, we know that it's one of the first archaeological maps in Europe. It's one of the first representation of a territory directly put into... Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just... So this is really the slab I was mentioning, which is quite interesting. It's a slab found in a small village in Le Hans, Saint-Bélec, found in the beginning of the 20th century. And as I told you, we couldn't identify the signs directly engraved onto the slab. Finally, these signs have been identified quite recently using a GPS system to identify the territory in Brittany belonging to this slab and to be able to see that maybe there is more to discover. So a new excavation field has been opened directly in the former elements. This is just one example among all the different examples of a research development, but what we can do today too with former collection, ancient collection, even collections which are not really precisely located, is that. The fact that we can, yes, reopen researching file and of course, discover new items, which is the case with this small arrow that you can see. Sixth challenge, it will be the last one. It's just to keep at the same time balanced programs. We are not a massive team, of course, but at the same time, we have massive responsibilities for the society. So what we can do is really to develop let's say, this transmission thing between the researcher's world, and at the same time the audience world. We are aiming, when we are developing programs, to do so each time. That means that a program cannot be done if we don't have a research program behind. An audience action cannot be done if we don't have a research program behind. All of these elements that you can see are aiming to promote, of course, human mediation. We think that it's really at the core of our mission to do so and to put in contact all these elements. But at the same time, as we have a digital expert on board, we are quite, precise on the question of a digital AI, for instance, aggregative machines and so on, because they are really a help today to understand some elements. So, our main questions, and my main questions for you that have already done this fantastic work, is that We have a lot of issues, we have a lot of problematic about the question of restitution and images. I was speaking to you about this artistic collection which was built up since the 19th century. We have still illustrators on board today. Okay, how can we enhance that? How can we make for the people a clear understanding of this restitution are evolving and are linked with a researchers program? This is something which is important for us. The second thing is about which showcase. It's always a crucial point, but the showcases in the galleries are really important. We cannot have, let's say, a fallen about that. Third aspect, the question of aggregation, horizontal aggregation, I was speaking to you. That means that we need to face the legal aspects. Who have the right to use them, and what are the copyright, for instance, if we want to make freely available the question of the resourcing. As you could see, the buildings, assets, and works are another challenge. The question of the financial aspect is really important, and we are aiming to develop public-private opportunities about that. Of course, the sustainability. We are really working by trying to maintain a low-tech approach of the building at the maximum level. We know that we are in the third phase of this development of a museum. That means that the first one took 45 years, the second one took 30 years. We are aiming about 20 years of works. That means that in 20 years ahead, we will not have the same technology than today, and we need to anticipate that. So for me, the low-tech is the best answer for that. And the final approach is how to spread the word about how can we preserve archaeology. I wanted to show you a small resources that we have created, which is freely available, and we were talking about that with our German colleague last night. And I guess this is something that we can share too. You have no word, which is quite useful. It was really designed to finally be globally used. So these cartoons, it's something that we are developing today, a lot of cartoons. Of course, the kids are fond of. The kids are one of our targets. And at the same time, it's quite evident to express. It's really a useful mean. It's a bit caricatural, okay, but it's working. It's also, I think, something that we are sharing in common too. And that's why I wanted to conclude by this animation. How can we preserve globally the common heritage? And I think this is something that we can share too. Thank you for your attention.